Freedom Radio Hour. Live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Freedom Radio Hour. We're live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, and on the web at dwobmusicradio.com. I'm your host, DJ Adam Cruz, and normally I have my co-host, Eddie Nicholas, here in the building. Eddie's off for tonight, so I'll be handling the reporting. All right, first of all, I want to let our viewers and our listeners know that the Freedom Radio Hour is here, not only giving you fantastic music, but we're here also being your number one source for music, business news, and trends from around the globe. All right, so the first order of business is this crazy news from MTV. Here in the States and around the globe, MTV is short for music television, right? So how about recently, their president, Sean Atkins, just issued a statement that indicates that MTV will be moving into an entirely new direction in the 2016 and beyond. So guess what they're trying to do? Let's insert the drum roll. They're bringing music back to music television. I know. Well, first of all, let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about what they're trying to do. They're starting to bring back live music programming through their MTV Unplugged. You remember MTV Unplugged was essentially taking all of the electricity out, or all of the sort of artificialness of the live performance, and really stripping it down. So you had these artists that really heavily depended sometimes on over-processing and studio work, that kind of thing, and it stripped it all down and allowed for a more acoustic feel. That started in 1989, and then they stopped it around 2014. But my favorites of the MTV Unplugged was the Nirvana. I loved their Unplugged, and I loved Mary J. Blige's Unplugged, and I loved Lauryn Hill's Unplugged. That's when like people felt she kind of went a little bit to the left. I kind of like that stuff. Anyway, but MTV stopped doing all that. But let's go back a little bit even further than that. MTV started in August 1981, right? And they started with that campaign, I Want My MTV, this idea that you could get your music television, this 24-hour programming around music, videos, and music-related topics. So for those that had access to cable, because it is a cable network, you were able to enjoy the very beginning of a music video revolution. For me, I didn't grow up with cable. I grew up with regular network television. So being raised in the New York, New Jersey area, I relied on Friday night videos on Channel 11. And I also relied every day after school on Channel 31, and that was Video Music Box. And the really cool thing about Video Music Box, shout out to Rock McDaniels, was that it featured a lot of sort of off the beaten path kind of artists, a lot of hip hop artists. I also saw my first sort of house music videos on Video Music Box. So I understand that even David Bowie, when MTV started to get really popular, came for one of the interviewers and said, hey, have you guys noticed that essentially you are putting a strong spotlight on white artists, mentioning Madonna, this Bruce Springsteen, Aerosmith, groups like that were getting a lot of shine at the time, and artists of color were getting less attention. So even David Bowie, the late great David Bowie, really ushered in this kind of new discussion about race as it plays out in music, right? So that was a really interesting time, and MTV really came up on the cable side. But what ended up happening in around 1985, there was the Parents Music Resource Center. It was started by Tipper Gore, Al Gore's wife, and basically her and a bunch of others got together and initially sort of graded on their own 15 songs that they thought were objectionable. They contained unsuitable content, and they highlighted those songs to make a broader argument that the music needed to be identified, labeled, if you will, whenever it had explicit content. I think it's time for a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the history of MTV, what they're talking about today, And we're also going to break down further of what's happening with exclusivity. You know, this idea that if you sign up with like an Apple Music, you only get Taylor Swift. And this idea that if you sign up with Tidal, you only get Beyonce only there. Well, all of that is kind of dying away. And we're going to talk about what's happening with that and more right here. Where? Capital Radio 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan.
Freedom Radio Hour. Live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM.
And we're back live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, and on the web at dwowmusicradio.com. You're deep in the zone right here at the Freedom Radio Hour, your number one source for music, business, news, and trends from around the globe. Last we broke, we were talking about the Parents Music Resource Center. That was started in part by Tipper Gore, brought to Congress, basically identifying initially 15 songs that were objectionable in their opinion. One of the songs that they targeted was Darling Nikki by the late great Prince. Rest in peace, Prince. And they sort of targeted that as having sexual overtures, so they wanted to include that in the 15, right? But anyway, through that effort, over time launched a barrage of censorship and editing that occurred with not only music and the labeling of music, but certainly music videos. Before we broke, we were also talking about MTV and their brand new announcement that they're pivoting to music again, offering initially live music through their MTV Unplugged series. They're bringing it back, and it's going to have new, fresh ideas along with its characteristic sound and signature look and feel. But they're also going to be bringing in another sort of series. In past episodes here, we were talking about the necessity for having a 360 view of videos now. Now, basically, the music programming efforts are around that very idea. So this kind of project called Wonderland, MTV is promising that they'll air, is about having sort of opinionated music concepts. It's kind of, figure it's a music show, like a countdown figure, like a TRL or something like that, except it's going to contain 4 different or 5 different opinionated tastemakers, and the space is like in a multi-room environment. And they're all going to be going, I get the sense that it's going to be sort of fast-paced, back and forth. It will feature live music, live performance, music videos, and more around that. And that's going to be called Wonderland. They're also planning to collaborate with Mark Burnett, who's behind The Voice here in the U.S. It's like American Idol or any of those other voice competition shows. But for this one, MTV is backing a series by Mark Burnett that targets hip-hop artists and them getting shine in front of industry legends and experts, right? So that's kind of what they're looking at. But they seem to be pivoting away from the reality show era. But I think it was a little too late. As I mentioned before, MTV started in August of 1981. Through what was happening with the Parents Music Resource Center, the explicit lyrics content, the censorship of music videos, I realized, and everyone realizes in industry, that MTV was slowly pivoting away from music videos, especially those that had objectionable content. And over time, there started to be more of that when you consider the infiltration of hip-hop and alternative music that had explicit content or imagery on occasion. So that became really difficult for MTV, which, like today, Tidal and Spotify were built on the backs of advertising through music, right? MTV back then was doing the same thing, trying to build advertising and more. But after 10 years of existence, that's 1991, just a short time thereafter, they launched their very first reality show called The Real World. And to many insiders, they point to The Real World as ushering in a wave of reality show phenomenon that we see today in culture. So they point to MTV to kind of, they not only pivoted away from music, but they completely shattered that whole brand to start a new brand around reality television programming. So MTV now in 2016, I find it fascinating that they too now are trying to jump on the sort of music content bandwagon that is the same thing that Spotify's after, that Tidal is after, that Apple Music is after. So I find it to be really, really fascinating. And speaking of which, there seems to be this really interesting thing going on with the fact that, for a long time, some companies like an Apple Music said, sign up through us and you'll get Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift's music is only available at Apple Music. So through the analyses over time, they found out that, of course, the obvious is that the fans will follow the artists, right? So they end up going to Apple Music in that instance. Other fans of, say, Beyonce tend to follow Beyonce to Tidal, which is where you can get her content exclusively, along with her video, her visual album that's just been released, etc. Except that kind of has been washed away over time. Why? Because you're seeing more and more windowing releases. Remember, in past episodes, we talked about the difference between exclusivity and windowing. To readdress it, basically, windowing is putting the content on one site, say iTunes, for a while, and then you put it on another site for the latter. Except through this model, through the Tidal and Spotify and Apple Music models, they were saying, join our service because we have exclusive content, meaning that you are only going to get, say, a Taylor Swift through Apple Music, right? Well, that's kind of changing because even Drake, the rapper Drake, who's on, I think he's on Tidal, is planning an Apple Music release for a week. Even Beyonce's new Lemonade visual album, while she's supposed to only be available through the Tidal service, she also released the visual album on HBO. So it was released in two different ways for a spell. So I'm wondering how this changes everything when you consider that the streaming service that wants you to sign up because they have exclusivity is not really being exclusive anymore. Let's take another break. When we come back, we'll be talking about that and more right here at the Freedom Radio Hour, your number one source for music, business news, and trends from around the globe. Capital Radio, 91.6 FM.
Freedom Radio Hour.
And we're back live on Capital Radio, 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan. You're deep in the zone right now at the Freedom Radio Hour. We're your number one source for music, business news, and trends from around the globe. Before we broke, we were talking about the difference between exclusivity and windowing. In short, for a while, these Tidal services and Spotify and Apple Music, they want your money, not once, they want it every month. They want you to spend $10 a month. And they're saying if you sign up with us, you get your favorite artist that you're into. If you're into Beyonce, you probably will sign up for Tidal because Tidal has all of their content exclusively. That's what they're telling you. If you sign up with Apple Music, they're saying you can only get a Taylor Swift through the Apple Music service. You can't get it anywhere else. Well, now what we're seeing is a sort of a loosening of that rule. And what you're seeing is more of a windowing effect where an artist will put up content on one site for a little while, say 30 days, 24 hours, whatever the time range is, and then they will release it again on other sites, and so on and so on. The idea, though, is that the streaming service, when you remove the exclusivity model, you're really only left with streaming. So it becomes, okay, I don't mean to be reductive here, but if you're removing this sort of bonus, which is the exclusivity model, and you're only left with streaming, I wonder how much that levels things out. Some artists tend to be more involved with their deal with their company. Like I argue an Apple Music and a Taylor Swift seem to be more married in their contract than, say, a Drake with Tidal or something like that, or even a Kanye West. Because Kanye West, his album, The Life of Pablo, was supposed to be exclusively available through the Tidal service, right? So if you're a Kanye fan, chances are that you signed up with Tidal that you would only get the Kanye material there. But it turns out that Kanye's released the project on iTunes, the competitor. That's Apple. So now it becomes, if you remove this exclusivity part of it, the feature of that, how different are the services? I don't think it's very different, but the numbers aren't lying. Apple Music, they are now at 13 million subscribers. As we mentioned in previous episodes, Tidal, after their 1-year anniversary since Jay-Z purchased it for $56 million a year ago, they're now at 3 million plus subscribers, which is actually very interesting when you break away the fact that more than half of those numbers they're electing to choose the higher tiered service. They want to pay $20 a month for the streaming service because, as I mentioned before, that's considered the high definition, high level, high end streaming feature. So more than half of those 3 million subscribers on Tidal are electing for that top notch streaming, which I thought wouldn't really happen because most people are listening to their material through a phone or something similar, where it really is fine if you only paid the $10, you know? So I found that really fascinating. And I also wonder whether MTV, going back to what they're trying to do, I wonder whether MTV is having enough of a conversation with Revolt, in particular Keith Clinkscales. He's the CEO of Revolt TV. If you remember, Revolt TV was launched in part by P. Diddy, who was trying to bring the video music back, right? So Revolt TV has been around a while, and they're doing a lot of programming around music, kind of what MTV is pivoting back to, it seems. So I wonder if they're talking enough to each other to figure out what the current climate is around music videos. As I mentioned before, once the reality show age set in, MTV completely abandoned that music video concept in favor of more reality shows. So there was the famous "Where did the music video go?" or "Where did the music and music television go?" So now they're trying to bring it back, but Revolt, I don't know how much information they're giving because they're in the middle of their own fight with the FCC. The FCC, in short, that's the Federal Communications Commission. They put forth a proposal to deal with how we're receiving information through devices. You know, through cable, for the longest time, you had like a little cable box on top of your TV. That's called a set-top box. And right now, there's a proposal coming forward through the FCC that's trying to change the information that is exchanged through those boxes. In particular, gaming consoles and other units like TiVo, they're considered third party, but they want to have information. They want to know basically 3 basic sets of information, and this proposal, if it passes, will allow for this to happen now. So on figure your cable TV box, or let's say an Xbox 360, because you know gaming consoles, you can access cable television through the gaming console now. So between that, your TiVo or a standard cable box, they're trying to open things up through the FCC. So what the FCC is proposing is that we allow for 3 pieces of information to be streamed back and forth to third parties. Okay. So the first thing is they said that actual content distributed should be allowed, information on what the content is, the channel listings, the videos on-demand lineup that includes that content. All of that information should be shared, along with this third item, permissions on actions that a given device is allowed to do, including recording. So if you are receiving content, depending on the device, the proposal, if passed, would allow you to access it in a new way, according to these 3 pieces of information. They're saying that based on the challenge in court, that it won't be able to overcome it. Another way of saying that it won't go far, it'll be dead in the water. But it's a fascinating thing right now that Revolt TV is really trying to deal with, how these 3 pieces of information are exchanged back and forth, whether we should have access to that or not, and how that affects the industry that they're most interested in right now. And then we have MTV on the other side announcing a pivot back to music programming. So I wonder what this is all about. We're going to break down more and this here at the Freedom Radio Hour. I always say that and I get a little tongue-tied, but you'll bear with me. I always say this show is great if you are a songwriter, if you're a DJ, a producer, even just a music enthusiast. The Freedom Radio Hour is great for you to get your new music news all from around the globe right here at your fingertips. All right, make sure to, I wanted to mention a couple of things. Check out the website, freedomradiohour.com, and post a comment under everything that we're talking about because we want to hear what you have to say. Check out EddieNicholas.com. He has his latest single entitled One Time. It's out now. Yours truly, Adam Cruz, my 3rd album, the Freedom album, is out everywhere. Check out DJAdamCruz.com for more of this fantastic music. Thank you so much for listening. And in future episodes, we're going to be talking more about what's going on with the way the Copyright Royalty Board has redistributed the rates and how they increase the rates and how that affects how that affects the non-interactive radio that we're talking about, like the Pandoras of the world. Because, you know, Pandora is trying to be like a Tidal and offer more exclusive content, but they have a big problem because Pandora is considered non-interactive. I'll break down what that means on the next episode. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great weekend. Have a great week ahead, and we'll see you next time. Peace.